Construction Industry Council Diversity and Inclusion panel, and I'm delighted to welcome everybody today to this webinar, which is about gender representation in our industry, policy, theory and reality. And I'd really like to say thank you to you all for taking time out of your day to join us. But also particularly, I'd like to thank the men on the call. It is International Men's Day. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but I just wanted to bring your attention to that. And I just wanted to say as well, I mean, I wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for the man that mentored me many years ago. You know, he kind of really believed in me and saw something in me that I didn't have the confidence at that time to see myself. So I think men have got a great role to play in helping and championing us to have more diversity in the industry. I think there's a role for us all to play and to come together to support each other. And I think in the same way that in the financial sector you had the likes of the 30% Club that Dame Helena Morrissey founded to get more women on boards, I think there's an opportunity for leaders in the industry to really champion more diversity. So it's great to have you on the call today. Just to let you know, we're going to be recording this as well, so that you'll be able to share this with your networks and people in your organisation afterwards if you feel that's appropriate. I'm just going to give a brief introduction before I introduce Holly McLoughlin. So I just want to give you a little bit of background about sort of how we came to be here and talk about this today. So for those of you who haven't heard of the Construction Industry Council, so we're a not-for-profit representative forum for the professional bodies, research organisations and specialist business associations in the construction industry. So our members include like the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, the Royal Institution of British Architects, the Chartered Institute of Builders as well. So, you know, people, they're sort of an idea of the members that we've got in our organisation. And the mission is to improve the UK construction industry by collectively representing and supporting the built environment professions. And our motto, if you like, is built environment professions together. So it's all about supporting each other. And about, I think it was 3 years ago, the CIC celebrated its 30th birthday. And to do that, we were looking ahead to the next 10 years and thinking, well, you know, where can we see ourselves being in 10 years' time? And we made the decision to actually do a survey out to industry. So this was a CIC at 30 survey. And we asked the questions such as, what's the one biggest challenge the industry needs to address to make it one of choice in the next 30 years? Is there any specific aspect that would make you consider leaving? And do you think the industry is doing enough to attract, retain and develop an inclusive workforce? And this is just an idea of the type of responses that came back. And I think the one that's key today is that 72% of the sample, and I think there was about 1,100 people responded to the survey. So 72% of the sample think that the industry is not doing enough to attract, retain and develop a diverse workforce. And, you know, the question is, what more can be done? And these are the key themes that came out of our survey. So about image, progression, procurement, inclusive design, leadership and technology. So they were all the themes where people felt that we needed to bring change to the industry to make it the one of choice. So today is the first webinar in a series that the Construction Industry Council is going to be hosting. And particularly today, we're going to be talking about image and diversity and how we attract more diversity into the industry. And we definitely need your help. So following the survey, we actually put together a roadmap for change, and this is on a website, and it's www.roadmapforchange.org.uk, and it's all about sort of bringing together case studies and information that's going to help people to bring change to their organisations and collectively the industry as well, to make the built environment an industry of choice. So please do check out the website and see how you can contribute, and we will be sending people information about this following the webinar as well. So I'm now going to hand you over to Holly McLoughlin, who's going to be talking today. And just to give you a bit of a background about Holly. So Holly's background is as an electrical and instrumentation engineer who went on to launch and head the CIOB Academy. And that was where I first met Holly, because we worked together on an ethics course a few years ago. So she now works with forward-thinking individuals and organisations to shift business culture through developing talent and leadership. And in addition to her work at Evolving Careers, Holly is researching how to create an innovative construction industry through a master's in career development. And Holly shared with me the research that she was doing, particularly around policy in our industry and how whether or not it is or isn't driving the diversity that we're looking for. And I just think that this research is something different and something that we haven't seen before, which is why I'm really excited to share it with you today. So I'm going to hand you over to Holly, and I hope you enjoy this presentation.
Thanks, Maria. I'll just share my screen as well here. Okay, so let's see. So is everyone able to give me a thumbs up and just let me know that you can see my screen? There's some reactions at the bottom. Brilliant, thanks. It's great to see those. So Maria, thank you so much for the invite today. As Maria already said, we came together to build a course on ethics in construction when I was at CIOB. And I'm so grateful for the invite today from yourself as the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion panel at the CIC, and also to the CIC for hosting this. So I thought I'd start with a little bit about me, not because you need to know about me, but so that you can understand the different lenses that I'm able to look at the industry through, because I think this is important in terms of understanding why I've come to some of the conclusions I have in the presentation today. So, as Maria mentioned, my career started out as a design engineer. I actually studied integrated engineering, which gave me two great lessons. The first lesson was the ability to look at things as a whole system and also to look at the detail of that system. And the second lesson was all about getting to the root cause of problems, and when you design things, really understanding what a user needs and wants and understanding that. And it gave me some really great critical analysis skills that have served me and led me to where I am today. I also was trained in all of the BREEAM assessor qualifications and used to train assessors at BRE before I went on to start up the CIOB Academy, and then now where I run Evolving Careers, which is all about shifting the culture through career development. And it might look like a bit of an odd career journey to many, but for me, I remember sitting in engineering and realizing that I'd gone into engineering because I wanted to make the world more sustainable. And I thought, well, engineers are the people who do that. And the reality in industry was that choices were being made purely on profit, that teams weren't working efficiently because of personal things, because of training needs, all that sort of stuff. And that's what really led me to move into the training world. And I also had done some work with the Big Bang Fair as well, which had kind of inspired me and made me realize, wow, I'm so passionate about people. So I'm able to look at the industry from the lens of being a member of it, having worked in a design team, from the lens of education, having been educating and training and doing people development. But I'm also able to take an outside of industry look in terms of career development and look at what's going on more broadly and where we can learn lessons from other sectors. And with the research I've been doing, it's really led me to believe that women really can transform the construction industry if we're giving the opportunity to take action. And so that's kind of my lenses. And what I'd like to also say is, as I go through the presentation today, if you have questions, I'm quite happy to field them as we go, rather than right at the end. So if you'd like to ask questions, use your reaction buttons on the little panel, and just give me a thumbs up and I'll note your name down, and when I'm ready to stop, I'll invite you in. What you will need to do is just unmute yourself and then remute yourself afterwards, so that we've got nice clean sound for everyone. Okay, so let's get started. Today I'm going to be talking to you about 3 things. We're going to explore your understanding of the construction sector deal and gender diversity and inclusion, because when I go out and speak to people in industry, sometimes they don't understand why diversity and inclusion is something government are pushing. And there is a real business driver for this, a financial real driver. So I want to get that clear. But I also wanted to tell the story of the industry over the past 20 or so years, because I've been in the industry that long and listening to all of the issues about women for that long, and quite frankly, very little has changed. And I think that's a real shame. It's getting better, but it's not where it could be. The second thing we're going to talk about is we're going to reflect on the policies, the theories, and the reality of driving gender diversity in construction, because there really are these 3 stories. There's the story of what government are doing and what they think is needed. There's the theories of how do we shape business and talent and people and develop careers. And then there's the reality of, okay, so what kind of results are we getting and how are people actually experiencing our industry? And is that how we want it to be? And the third objective is we're going to, at the very end, have a little look at what you can do on a personal level and on an organisational level in order to support more gender diversity. But many of these things also apply to other forms of diversity too. Okay, so what is gender diversity? I'd love to get you typing in the comments what it means to you right now. What do you think the definition of gender diversity is? Okay, I can't see any comments. Can you, Maria?
Yeah, I can.
You can. Could you share them with me? I don't know why they're not coming through on my chat screen.
Yeah, so we've got equality in reality, not just in theory. Mm-hmm. Having a good balance of male and female. Inclusivity, fair for all, opportunity for all. Your gender expression isn't a barrier. Equality. Mm-hmm. So there's some of the responses that are coming through.
Okay, great. Thanks for those. Yeah, they're not too far off some of the definitions and things that we're going to talk about today. So before we get started, I just want to get a feeling for where the group is at as well. So I'd like you again to type in the comments. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think you know about gender diversity right now? So 1 being not very much at all, and 10 being absolutely loads. Can you type a number into the comments for us? And again, Maria, if you could feedback for me.
Yeah, so we've got 3 5s, we've got 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 6, 3, 5, 6, 5 to 6. We've got 3 8s. So we've got a few 8s and we've got a few sort of 5 to 6 is what's coming through.
Yeah. And that's usually where it is when I run these presentations. We're either somewhere near the bottom knowing we know something, but we don't feel like we know enough, or we feel like we've got quite a good handle on it, but there's still more to learn. So we'll check in at the end and see if any of those figures have changed as well. Okay, so the definition of gender diversity, this is one that I picked up from an author who's quite well respected, and she says, it's an equal representation of different genders, typically of men and women, but it can also include non-binary genders. Now, in both government generally and in the construction industry, all of the data is binary. It's all men and women. Okay, so when I talk today, that is the language that I'm going to use. And it's because that's all that is available in terms of the data by and large, in terms of specific stuff for the construction industry. So this is what the general population looks like in the UK, according to the last census. 51% female and 49% male. So based on that definition of equal representation, we should be looking to have around 50-50 men and women within the construction industry. However, that's not what we've got. Does anybody know the figures for what percentage of the construction population is female? Type them in the comments. We can see if you're right.
We've got 13%, 15%, 12%, 14%, 18%, 11%, 20% at a guess, around 14%. We've got 7%, 3%.
Yeah, so we all know it's pretty low.
Yeah.
And depending on which research study you look at, they do vary between about 10 and 20%. So everybody's in the right ballpark. I've gone for this one, which has come from the construction sector deal itself, just because it's one of the more recent ones and it's one of the more thorough ones. It's not just, you know, something by a magazine or something like that. And they reckon it's around 14% of the workforce are female versus 86% male. So that's a huge gap that we've got compared to what the population average is. And I'm sharing this to give you a feel for the reality of our industry. This picture here is what that 14% looks like. And this picture is actually more diverse in terms of ethnicity and race than typical. So this is a very diverse team in the construction industry. How does that make people feel? And if you're a man, could you imagine if the genders were swapped over in this picture, how that might feel for you? Okay, so why are we talking about gender and gender diversity within an industrial policy, within an industrial strategy? So by and large, everything to do with STEM skills in our industry sits in between the Department for Education and the Department for Business. And so these are the two fundamental papers that relate to all things diversity and STEM. So we have the careers strategy, the national careers strategy from the Department of Education, and we have the industrial strategy that's specific to the construction sector deal. And so I share these because I want to tell you the story of why diversity and inclusion matters. What is the business driver for it? Why is it that government are pushing these things? You know, I've had many directors speak to me and say privately, you know, Holly, where I live, there isn't that much diversity. I don't understand this. I don't really get why we need to be doing this. So hopefully you'll be armed to share these kind of messages with people in this presentation. So the industrial strategy for Great Britain sits above the construction sector deal. And in this, it recognises that we have a shortage of STEM skills to deliver this. And within this paper, they talk about the 5 foundations of achieving the British, the UK industrial strategy. And those things are ideas. We want to be the most innovative economy. People, we want to have good jobs and greater earning power. We want brilliant infrastructure. We want the best place to start and grow a business. And we want to have prosperous communities across the UK. Now, construction is identified within this strategy as the only industry that touches on all 5 of these, and it touches on them in a major way. So this is where funding until about 2025 is going to be channeled into projects that support these 5 foundations of productivity. And then underneath it talks about some of the challenges that the UK wants to address. So we want to be at the forefront of artificial intelligence and the data revolution. So we talk a lot about BIM in the industry, but it's so much more than that. We want to have clean green growth. We've got the future of mobility. The government wants us to become a world leader in the way people, goods and services move. And construction is going to play a huge part in that. And if we're going to get better at doing mobility, then we need to have more diverse people, people with disabilities, people with mobility issues, people who know about these things within the industry, supporting the design, supporting the way that we operate. We've also got an aging society, so we need to be innovative in order to support them. So why does this matter? Well, the government looked at their industrial policy, the high level one, and they set out a Construction 2025 paper. And in this paper, the reason they chose to look at construction is because they said, okay, construction is really going to help us with our industrial policy. It's got huge growth forecasts of around 70%. These figures were a long time before we knew COVID was going to happen, so I'm not sure they're the same now. We provided, at the time when this was published, 7% of all UK employment. It's now 1 in 10. So 10% of the UK population are employed within the construction sector. And they knew that there's huge potential in construction for long-term partnerships to deliver a lot of growth for the economy. And this is why the Farmer report was so important at the time when it was published, because what that basically said was, okay, if we're going to achieve this strategy, then what's going to get in the way for construction? Because it's our biggest industry, it's one of the biggest contributors to GDP, it's the biggest employer of any sector in our country. And they said, oh, well, you know, we're not very productive. We could be doing things better if we look at the models that are used in manufacturing and started to do more offsite and things like that. They said, our business model isn't sustainable. We're putting everything down the supply chain. We don't have enough collaboration. And this next point is really important for me. It identified that if we don't resolve the skills shortages, then the cost of labour is going to go up. It's going to inflate the cost of labour, because when you can't get enough good people, they're going to start to charge more. They're going to have more power to ask for more money, because companies will want to get them, because there won't be that many other people around. And what that does is it pushes prices up, it reduces productivity in the industry. And ultimately what that leads to is we could be outpricing ourselves from a global market, in the sense of not necessarily just in labour, but also in companies that are using more modern techniques off-site, are able to ship things in the UK, do things more efficiently. So there's a lot of risk here that the government is trying to mitigate within our industry. They talked about the dysfunctional training model, a lack of innovation and collaboration, and this idea of needing a new public image for the holistic built environment process. Now, as we go through this presentation, I'm going to be challenging some of these points that are actually made in this paper in a little bit of detail. But the first question you come to then is, well, if we need to solve the STEM skills gap, what skills should we be developing? And there's a really interesting thing that in the UK, the Office for National Statistics doesn't identify construction as a STEM industry. And this is in 2018, after we've been pushing for STEM skills for such a long time. So the government doesn't actually have the data in order to support the industry as well as it could do. The Scottish government realised this, and they created an evidence base which does identify construction as a STEM industry. What they essentially did is looked at all the pathways into the construction and STEM industries and listed all of those routes, and there was a lot of construction in there. But that's not being used widely. That's really just limited to Scotland. So then we come down to the industry level industrial strategy, the construction sector deal, which is all about transforming productivity through technology and skills. And again, this is where it talks about we now employ 1 in 10 working people in our industry in the whole of the UK. But this piece around transforming productivity through technology and skills is really the main driver for diversity and inclusion. And I'm going to talk about why. So we need to attract, train and retain a more skilled workforce. We need to develop a single industry platform, this industrial strategy says, to promote careers in the construction industry. We need to increase diversity, and we need to meet the challenge of we're going to have a management gap with so many people aged over 50 and not enough people coming in at the bottom. So these all sound like great things on the surface, but this is where I would say our industrial strategy starts to fall apart. Because when we start to talk only about the construction sector deal, and these points that I've got on the screen, they don't match up with other policies that government have. So, for example, the careers strategy says that we need as a country to have one industry platform for promoting careers and for all of the industries to feed into that. Yet in construction, we are doing the very thing that we always do, which is we are doing our own thing and staying in isolation and not looking outside of our own walls to other industries and other parts of policy for best practice. And I think this happens because at those workshops and those events where people attend in order to input and feedback on the industrial strategy, I think it's a lot of the same people, white males of a certain age, largely. And I'm not blaming them for this either, because they only know what they've been told. They're not experts in the policy. They're not experts in diversity and inclusion. So it's kind of like the blind leading the blind sometimes. And so they also talk about diversity here, but they talk about it in relation specifically to gender, ethnicity, and disability. Now, this is not the definition of diversity. This is how the construction industry often labels it. But if we were more aligned with the careers strategy for the country and used their definitions that have already been reviewed, peer reviewed, accepted as best practice, we would see that it's much broader and we need to focus broader than that. We'd also see that instead of focusing our single industry platform just on promoting careers in construction to the next generation, the skills strategy talks about career changes. It talks about how people no longer stay in one sector or one job role in the same way they did. And I think construction industry is missing a big trick here, in the sense that there are some incredibly talented people who are leaving other sectors and they are not being supported to come into construction. And where we have that management gap, where we have these workers who are aged over 50, who are going to be moving towards retirement over the next 20 years, we're not going to have enough young people to fill all of their roles. So we're going to have to bring in really well-trained managers from other industries and give them the construction knowledge that they need. But when you look at the training that we offer, when you look at what gets funded in terms of people coming into construction, we're not addressing that, not nearly enough. So Maria, if we do have any questions, please do just let me know.
It's not so much questions, but there's a few sort of comments that have come in. So just around, you know, when you showed that photograph at the beginning, you know, there's some comments to say not really surprised. There was a question that was asked about, you know, do we have percentages of trainees or apprentices or grads entering the industry? And I just did some quick research specifically for apprenticeships. The latest data I could find was that out of 20,000 males, there was 260 female apprentices. So that's 3%. And that kind of equates to, you know, the percentage that we tend to have of women on the tools. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and I've got some figures a bit later on that too.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that I've had in trying to find data is that determining which engineers are part of construction and which ones aren't is a big challenge. Engineering generally has really good data on this. Construction, it's a little bit more challenging. It's much more piecemeal. But we are getting better at that as an industry, I would say, as well. So I'll share some more of those stats a little bit later on. So coming back to this shortfall in the construction sector deal, it's talking about diversity as gender, disability and ethnicity. It's missing out age, even though that's one of the issues they list as you know, we've got issues around having an aging workforce. It doesn't include LGBTQ+, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. So people who are coming in from disadvantaged and backgrounds of poverty, really, construction has always traditionally really helped people into good paid work, people from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and we're not focusing on that anymore. We're not including race, and race and ethnicity are two very different things. Ethnicity has very different nuances, and the data between race and ethnicity really varies, and often we hear these two words and think they're the same thing, but they're not. We're not thinking about religious beliefs and being able to cater to people with various religious beliefs in work. We're not thinking about political beliefs and any other ideologies as well. So there's a lot that's missing from that diversity piece right now in terms of where our industrial policy, the construction specific part, the construction sector deal, is pointing us to. The other thing that I note is it only talks about diversity, whereas in the full country strategy, it talks about diversity and inclusion. And diversity without inclusion is like an Energizer bunny without a battery. It's just not going to go anywhere. You're going to record statistics, maybe you might have a policy, but the end result is nothing happens. There's no motion, there's no action. Okay, and I think there's just a very subtle note about our culture here in construction that the people who are inputting to the policies are talking only about diversity and not inclusion. And I got to thinking, well, why is that? Why do we do that? So diversity and inclusion together, what does that mean? Well, according to the Home Office, it means making every effort to eliminate discrimination, creating equal opportunities, and developing good working relationships between different people. So I'd love to I've got my little question mark here to remind me. Share in the chat if you believe that we're doing all three of these points in our industry. You can give it a quick yes or no. You can give it a bit more detail if you want. Are we making every effort to eliminate discrimination? Are we creating equal opportunities? Are we developing good working relationships?
We've got a lot of no's.
Mm-hmm.
Still a long way to go. I think some people are, but on the whole, no. Slow progress. I think we are much better at it, but clearly work to do. More no's, but we are slowly improving.
Yeah.
No, some organisations are trying, but that is probably 1%. So often discrimination is put down to a one-off and no one learns from the event.
Absolutely.
This is a generation thing though. So I think there is stuff happening, but I think part of the challenge is that we don't know about it because people don't necessarily share kind of what they're doing either.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Maria. I think that there has been a lot of progress, certainly in my career. The difference between when I started and now, and the things that organisations are doing, it's come a long way. But I think the pace is glacial. We're doing it, but we're doing it very slowly. And again, it comes back to this concept that we're not collaborating. Every company is doing stuff in isolation. Every company is doing things different. There isn't an industry standard around this stuff. And so, yeah, there's more work to be done. And the question is, how do we shift the culture quickly enough to facilitate this? So I got to thinking about, well, why is it that we're not doing the inclusion bit? And I think it might have something to do with the Equality Act. A lot of organisations say to me, oh, but we do the Equality Act, so we must be doing it. So the Equality Act 2010, all this asks a business to do is to legally protect people from discrimination in the workplace and wider society, and to cover equal opportunities. But what it doesn't cover is developing good working relationships between different people. And this is often the hardest bit to do. So it's really the inclusion piece, making people feel like they belong, that's missing. And that's, if you take nothing else away from today, it's that we really need to help different people feel like they belong in the industry. So what's causing this? And this is where we start to move into the theories now that are coming from social science, from career development, from psychology. And we often talk about young children. They form views about careers at an early age. And there's this theory about fields of practice where we would ask ourselves, if we want to improve at this age, are females being engaged in male fields in early play and exposure to people breaking gender stereotypes in school, in lessons and in work experience? And I would say Go Construct have got some great content for schools and for this age, and there's been a lot of traction at this age. It's been really recognised by teachers, by careers people, and also by industry, that more people are starting to support those early years of education. Another cause is the way we interact with our community. So young people coming into the industry are most influenced by teachers and parents, first and foremost. I think we're going to see a shift to that being career guidance over the next few years in a way that it never has been before, because as part of the skills strategy, we have now created formal qualifications for people who are career practitioners or career development professionals. And there's been a big move towards it not being done by teachers, but it needs to be done by independent people who are fully informed about all of the options of a young person, so that young people aren't steered into other people's preferences. And I think that's going to be one of the best things in terms of young people's careers coming over the next few years with these changes. And it also represents a huge opportunity for our industry to provide a toolkit to careers guidance officers, to people who sit down and do one-to-ones and need to be able to share with young people what is a career in the built environment like. It also relates to things like events and interactions with where employers go into schools. And within the skills strategy for the UK, there's now formal channels where those existing organisations can go and offer support. And, you know, one of the things that struck me, having come more from the engineering side before I came to the construction world, is that, you know, when you go to STEM events, there's the country's biggest STEM event is the Big Bang Fair. And it's much more about science and engineering. And there's not a great construction presence there. And I think there is opportunity for the built environment to create its own kind of event specifically about coming in, because we have such a big impact on, we have such a big social impact, and we have such a big environmental impact. And those messages are part of the shift in image that Maria mentioned at the start that need to happen. And there's this guy called Bordeaux, and he had this theory about habitus, which is like, what are our habits and how can we change the perspective from which young females make decisions about careers in construction? And I share this question purely because if you are doing anything in your businesses, working with young people, this is the question to ponder in terms of what will you do? What can you offer? And then, as I said before, let's talk about motivations and statistics. Females are less attracted to study physics, engineering, or technology. Notice how construction is missing from that. And this is a very common set of language that is used in some of the statistics. And they go into industry unprepared for the reality of being a woman in a very male-dominated industry. And so what we see in the statistics is the proportion of females in GCSEs, in STEM subjects, in engineering apprenticeships. You know, it doesn't matter what you look at, you see this attrition rate. So up until about age 16, people are still interested. But from then on, they go down by half by the time they've finished their A-levels. They go down by nearly half again by the time they've finished their degree. And then only about half of those again actually go into industry. And then we lose more women from industry as well. So you can see, even where people have interest, women are being put off. So something must be putting them off at every stage. And we have to start having these uncomfortable conversations where we say, okay, so why is that? And I think motivational factors is part of it. So motivation is the thing that drives our behaviors, our actions, and essentially it's what causes us to repeat a behavior. So I found this little piece of research that I think it's based on 40,000 executive level responses to what is motivating them in their careers and in their leadership. And just take a moment to have a look at this. So we can see very clearly that men are, in general, they are sharing that they are much more focused on getting their self-worth from financial achievement, whereas women get their self-worth from being recognized by others. Women tend not to make their achievements visible, whereas men tend to make them very visible so everybody knows. Whereas a woman will generally wait for other people to recognize it in her before she realizes, oh, I can go. And these are some of the nuances as to why we have gender pay gaps, why men get ahead first. Men are much more focused on achieving and delivering for a customer, whereas a woman is much more motivated by having open-minded environments. Men are more motivated by power and by the tradition of maintaining the status quo, whereas for women, it's much more about creating a brilliant environment for people to thrive in, connecting with other people in our networks, and about innovation. And this bottom point really interests me, because I'm thinking, okay, so we have a lot of males in our industry. They're all maintaining the tradition and the status quo. And yet women are motivated by innovation. They don't want to be challenged. They want to come in and like make those changes. That's what's going to motivate them. And I think some of those behaviors around maintaining the processes and the status quo could be one of the things that are putting women off in our industry. And so it's an important point to note that motivating women is very different to motivating men. And are we training our managers to know that? Or are they expecting to treat women like they treat men? Because they need to be treated differently. We've also got unconscious bias, which a lot of people have heard of now, but often it's promoted as a single training course, and it gives people an awareness. But the big place where I think we need to shift this is around our hiring and our promoting processes, because what most executives recognize when they're hiring someone or promoting someone is they want that person to have an ability to do the job, and they want that person to have integrity. But the one thing that shows up in studies is that after a little bit of prompting, they realize, oh yeah, and it's, do I have an affinity with this person? How like me are they? Are they going to fit in? And so there's a big tendency for men to hire men that look like them, that act like them, and to have a higher level of distrust of a woman. So it means they don't get hired as much, and they don't get promoted as much. And then they're not making their achievements as visible as men do. So there's these real challenges around this. So coming back to our industrial strategy, there's a lot of shortfalls in it. And that's not to criticize it and say it's terrible, because it's not, but there's a lot of shortfalls, and that means there's a lot of opportunities for us to do better. In career development theory, we have practice and research that says that it's not just things like where do you want to work, your interest, skills and qualifications that determine whether someone will persist in an occupational choice. And I'm just going to very quickly talk you through some of those examples. So although women may on the surface have all the attributes that would make a great construction professional, some of their other psychological needs may not be getting met in our industry based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure many of you will have seen this at some point in your life, maybe in a management training or maybe in a book. So when I Google male and construction, this is genuinely yesterday what comes up as an image. And Google is the first place that most women will go to begin their career search if they've not been through a careers office. And I think it's really important to know that this is what women are seeing. And they're going to be asking, some of the questions from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Will I be safe? Will I feel like I belong? Will I have equal opportunities to succeed? Okay, so this is a bad example. A better example might be, let's say they end up on Go Construct and they see this image. This is a great advert for women. It's clean, it's aspirational, it looks diverse, it looks proud, it looks modern, and it looks environmental. They were my first impressions of this image. And we talk a lot about needing to change the image of the industry. But I would challenge this a little bit and say, let's be a little bit grounded and realistic, because the reality for those women is this is what they're going into. They have to know what's a real opportunity versus a perceived image. And I joke here because I've got these meerkats in because an old boss said to me, Holly, what's it like to be an engineer in our office? It was this huge office, 3,000 people. There was, you could count the number of women on two hands in the whole place. And I said, it's matter if she's attractive. It's not like a sexual thing, but every single man will turn his head and look. And it's quite an intimidating feeling for a young woman. And we're not preparing young women to deal with this when they go into the industry. They think they're getting this, but really they're going into, an office like this on the right-hand side and a different social culture than maybe what they've ever been used to before. These are some of the experiences of women that we see online. A male colleague sees you as the only female and says, where's the coffee, assuming that you're the secretary. women, young women, like the bottom picture here, she's saying, you know, I look like an engineer. This is an engineer. It's not all men. And then there's some comments about things that have been said to people, to women, by their bosses or colleagues. Don't get so emotional. Men are just smarter than women. You know, and these kinds of things are taken as banter. And as a woman, it's often a very difficult line to tread if you don't have strong management that don't allow those kinds of conversations and pull people up. And so often we're told to minimize it. We're told, oh, just, you know, they're just having a laugh. Oh, just have a thick skin, you know? And it's like, no, we really have to stop this behavior and we have to start speaking up about it. And we need our male managers to support us in that and to be trained in how to do that. Because there's too many cases in our industry where that's not happening. Then there's the self-actualization needs, which is all about how do we develop our full potential. So we get our, we know there's a gender pay gap, but it's huge with some of the big contractors, like nearly 30 or between 30 and 40% for some of them. I mean, as a woman, I'm thinking, really? I'm going to do the same job and get paid half, more or less, or 25% less? That's huge. Do I really want to be in this industry? And again, the representation of women on executive committees, on anything to do with boards and senior levels is very, very, very low. So am I going to be recognised? Can I reach my full potential in this industry? I think I might have better look elsewhere, if I'm being really honest. So this is part of what women are investigating in their young careers when they're making their career choices. And I think it's part of the story for why they're getting put off, why we have such high attrition rates. So again, there's 3 questions that we can be asking ourselves. Do females have the material assets to go into the construction industry? I think by and large they do. Are they able to access and leverage networks, associations and acquaintances and recognition? I think this is a huge area where we fall down. There are a lot of networks, there are a lot of associations, but the recognition part is very hit and miss depending on where you are in the industry. And then culturally, again, this is the number one shift we have to make, is do women naturally feel like they fit in the industry culture? And do they feel accepted and fully supported to be themselves? You know, a lot of women that I coach come to me and they say, I'm in a really senior position, I love my job, but I just feel like I can't be myself in work. I feel like I have to wear this mask. And we have to shift that with our culture. It can't carry on because we are going to continue to lose women. So I repeat this point, are we really needing to change the image of the industry, or do we need a fundamental change in culture? Are we selling young women a dream that isn't matching the reality? Is that why we're losing people at each step of the journey? I think it could be one of the reasons. And we know that people are more likely to come into the industry when they see more people of the same gender, ethnicity, skill level, and background. And so we are making progress. We have these female role models, but this is not necessarily the experience they have when they go into industry. So they see all of this great stuff online, they get this impression, but the reality is this what they're seeing in their office every day? Probably not. Is this what they're experiencing when they are being a graduate, when they come in for work experience? Probably not. And you'll note that ethnicity is noticeably missing from the picture, even amongst women. And I think part of that is the language that we use. If I go back to those motivations, when I read through some of these profiles and things, it's showing that we're using the language of men, achievement, power, and tradition. What we're not doing is telling stories about, this is the background of this woman, this is how she's been recognized, this is who she met, and this is what she is delivering in terms of innovation and creativity to our industry. Those stories are not full enough. They're much more around the male drivers. So we need to shift that language a little bit. And of course, we need to look at looking after women across the full life cycle of their careers much better. So all in all, the construction sector deal is aiming to transform productivity and boost earning power. Again, hear those male motivations. And one of the things they say is that if we have more digital and manufacturing technologies, then we will automatically get more diversity. Now, this is really surprising because I cannot find a single piece of theoretical or research evidence to support this. I think this is someone just saying it and assuming, and I don't know where that's come from. I can't find a basis for it. And then we've got the supply chain, which we haven't even got onto, but I'm just sharing that we need to enable diversity and minority-owned SMEs because our industry is made up mainly of SMEs and micro businesses, and we're not addressing that adequately enough. I've put a little link to the Building People crowdfunder because they are starting a platform to address this that you might want to take a look at. And then finally, I've noticed the time, so I'm just going to rush through this a little bit, and I will share these slides with you. Why should we have diversity inclusion? We need more than just a policy. We need to start taking action. And there's a lot that we can do. So I've given you on an individual level a list of things that you can personally do. And then I've also given you a list of things that organizations can do. So things like train male leaders in managing women and supporting women, give women specialist coaching around their careers, and so on. So I haven't left much time for Q&A, apologies, but I hope that's given you a really informed view of our industry. What is in the slides as well is all of the research papers that are relevant to the points that have been made today. And I'll leave you with one last question, which is, what's the one action that you could commit to change this? Of everything you've heard in today's session, what's something that you would like to change, that you feel you could personally do as a result going away from this? And again, Maria, if you could share some of that, or
Yes.
invite people into the screen, it's up to you.
Yes. Did you want to stop sharing your screen, and then if people want to stay and
Sure.
make some points or even ask a question? I appreciate
Amazing.
that we're going over slightly on time. But if anybody has got any specific questions that they want to ask before we leave. I mean, there's quite a lot of comments that sort of came through. Paul says, to everyone, encourage the point about managing women differently. And another point that was made was about what about those who do not identify with a gender and are gender neutral?
I know. We are not even having those conversations in this industry yet. We are so far away from there, and it's a real shame because we need more of that influence in our industry.
Yeah, definitely. And someone made a point about, I know it was the graphics, somebody else had done the graphics that you put together, but it was interesting that they'd had like the women with like the ponytail and the pink and the blue type thing. I think that kind of sort of sums it up really, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we've got, you know, everybody sort of given some great feedback about the presentation. And then they're looking forward to sort of going through the slides and things like that. So for people who, you know, are watching the replay, and for those that are still on, like what would you encourage people to do? Because I know we didn't have so much time to sort of go through the action bit, but like what would you encourage people to start doing differently?
And if you want to come on screen, just unmute yourself and maybe do a reaction of a thumbs up, and I'll say a name and just come on, unmute yourself and share your thoughts. Loretta.
Hello.
Hello, nice to have you.
Hi, thanks for that. That was really interesting. For me, my thoughts are with how extreme or not extreme we should try to be in pushing the boundaries, pushing the limits. And perhaps extreme is the wrong word, perhaps that sounds too harsh, but really, you know, it's like you said, if change is the pace of change is glacial, then my thought is, perhaps we should be really asking for or demanding a lot more. There are some companies who are, or which are, making really ambitious targets. Should that really be the norm? I think that's what I'm kind of thinking these days.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, Loretta. There is, one of the points that I've left in the final slides that I didn't quite cover there was that having targets does not solve the inclusion issue. And I think if we focus too much on them, what will happen is we'll get more people in, but we'll just keep losing more and more people who are diverse, because we're not including them, because the culture isn't there to support them, because managers don't understand how to properly and thoroughly support people who aren't white males. And that's not an attack on managers at all. It's a training need across the industry. So thanks for sharing. Anyone else want to come in with a thought or an action as a result of the presentation today?
There's a question from Helen. Would love to hear your thoughts on how motherhood affects the presence of women in construction. What can be done specifically to help mums stay in the industry? It's a huge problem.
It is a huge problem. And my personal view on it is this is not just an issue for mums, it's an issue for men too. We have a culture of working long hours, sacrificing family. Men sacrifice those families too, not just women. And I think this is a deeper cultural change that's needed. I don't think it's specific to women. I think it's specific to families, and families include all genders. What's your take on that, Maria?
I would agree. I mean, one of the statistics that came back in the survey was that one of the things that's causing people to leave the industry is a lack of work-life balance. And there was a larger percentage of men who actually filled out the survey. So, they're 100% feeling it as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm just conscious of time, and I'm really, I'm grateful for everyone to sort of who's taken part. What's the call to action? Like, what do we want people to be doing, sort of moving forwards? Sorry, that was a question more for you as well, Holly.
Okay, sorry. I thought you were asking the group.
No.
For me, the call to action is two things. If you are a woman in the industry, start demanding more. We have minimized these issues for a long time, and we've taken things on the chin and put on a thick skin, if you like, to things that are absolutely inappropriate, that could be classed as sexual harassment. And these things are commonplace. So I think on the one hand, we need women to start speaking up about this and not minimizing it. But on the other hand, we also need to make sure that we've got managers and organizations that can really hear them and support them through that appropriately, because that's, I think, one of the places where things get missed. I think when we can start to have those conversations, the culture will change more quickly, in my opinion. And I think so far we have a very top-down approach to diversity and inclusion in all forms of diversity. And it really needs to be embodied by every member of staff. Otherwise it doesn't work. And you will end up having targets that you might get, but you'll have attrition rates, and it's just not very efficient to go about things in that way.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a couple of comments from Dan to say you're fighting an industry that doesn't like change. That is very true. This is the same for diversity, innovation, digitization. Somehow the industry needs to learn to change across the board.
Absolutely. And that's why we need more women in, because when you look at those motivations of what motivates women, women are so motivated to bring that innovation and that change. But if it has to be supported by managers and leaders, and you asked for another call for action, Maria. Another one would be focus the women in your organizations on doing the innovation and the transformation. Support them to do it, because they are motivated by that. But we do need the support of the male side of the industry to do that. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap up now. So thank you everybody for taking part. And it would be great. I mean, we'll be sort of emailing everybody. We'll send out copies of the slides as well, and you'll have the recording if you want to share that with your networks. And I just encourage you to have a look at the Roadmap for Change as well. So it's www.roadmapforchange.org. We will be putting this presentation up there as well, and we just encourage everybody to get involved and share with you the good work that you're already doing in the industry to raise awareness, because I think we've all got to help each other on this journey, and we need to have transparency into what people are doing so people can learn from each other. So thank you so much, Holly. That was awesome. Some amazing insights that I don't think have been made, and connections as well. It's fascinating to hear your viewpoints from the careers perspective, and also how that sort of ties in with the industrial strategy as well. So thank you everybody. I hope you're having an awesome Thursday, and we'll send some information out about future presentations as well. So thank you.
Thank you.